What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved gentlemen finally reaches his breaking point on live television? You won't believe what unfolds when Tom Hiddleston's legendary composure crumbles under the relentless provocations of Jimmy Kimmel, in what witnesses are calling the most shocking talk show meltdown in recent memory. This isn't just another celebrity spat. This is the moment when professionalism died on national television, and the entertainment industry watched in horror as one of its most respected hosts crossed every line imaginable. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two titans clash in the most explosive confrontation late-night television has ever witnessed. The studio lights blazed with their usual intensity as Tom Hiddleston emerged from behind the curtain, his trademark smile radiating the warmth that had made him a global phenomenon. The audience erupted in thunderous applause, completely unaware. They were about to witness the systematic destruction of one man's reputation and the shocking revelation of another's true character. Hiddleston waved graciously, his perfectly tailored navy suit catching the studio lights as he approached Jimmy Kimmel's desk, with the confidence of someone who had conquered stages from Shakespeare's Globe to Marvel's biggest blockbusters. "Tom Hiddleston, everybody," Kimmel announced, his voice carrying that familiar late-night energy, though those paying close attention might have noticed something darker lurking beneath his practiced enthusiasm. The two men shook hands, and for a moment everything appeared perfectly normal. Just another A-list celebrity making the promotional rounds. "Great to have you back on the show, Tom," Kimmel said as they both settled into their positions. The host behind his imposing desk, the guest in the familiar hot seat that had hosted countless stars over the years. "You know, every time you're here, the ladies in our audience seem to forget how to breathe properly." Hiddleston chuckled politely, his British charm on full display. "Well, Jimmy, I'm just grateful to be here. American audiences have been incredibly kind to me over the years." His voice carried that distinctive warmth and sincerity that had made him not just a star, but genuinely beloved by fans worldwide. "Oh, we've been more than kind," Kimmel replied, and something in his tone shifted almost imperceptibly. "In fact, some might say we've been too kind. Tell me, Tom, do you ever feel like you've been, how should I put this, riding on the coattails of your more successful colleagues?" The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The audience stirred uncomfortably, sensing something was off, but not quite understanding what they were witnessing. Hiddleston's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before he recovered, his media training kicking in. "I'm sorry, Jimmy, I'm not sure I follow," Hiddleston responded carefully, his posture straightening slightly as his actor's instincts began detecting the subtle shift in atmosphere. "Well, let's be honest here," Kimmel continued, leaning back in his chair with the casual cruelty that would soon escalate into something far more sinister. "You've been playing the same character for over a decade now. Loki, right? The guy who loses every fight, gets defeated in every movie, and basically exists to make the real heroes look better. Some people are saying that's kind of your whole career, isn't it?" The studio fell silent. This wasn't the usual playful banter that characterized late-night television. This was something else entirely. Something that felt personal, calculated, and deliberately designed to wound. Hiddleston's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained steady when he replied, "I think Loki has had quite a journey, actually, and I've been fortunate to explore many other roles in theater and independent film," he said diplomatically, though those who knew him well might have detected the slight edge creeping into his usually melodious voice. "Theater," Kimmel repeated with a dismissive laugh that sent chills through the audience. "Right, because that's where actors go when they can't cut it in real movies anymore, isn't it?" The words hit like a physical blow, and for the first time in his career, Tom Hiddleston's legendary composure began to crack. His eyes flashed with something dangerous, a glimpse of the fire that usually remained hidden beneath layers of British politeness and professional training. The audience collectively held their breath, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented: the systematic destruction of one of Hollywood's most respected gentlemen. "Jimmy," Hiddleston said, his voice dropping to a lower register that carried an unmistakable warning, "I think you might want to reconsider that statement. Theater is where I trained, where I honed my craft, and where some of the greatest performances in history have taken place." But Kimmel wasn't backing down. In fact, he seemed energized by Hiddleston's obvious discomfort, like a predator that had caught the scent of blood. "Oh, come on, Tom. We're all friends here, right? I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. You've built your entire career on playing a character who's basically a professional failure. The god of mischief who can't actually accomplish anything meaningful. Kind of mirrors real life, doesn't it?" The studio audience began murmuring uncomfortably. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a public execution disguised as a late-night talk show segment. Several audience members could be seen shifting in their seats, their faces reflecting the growing unease that was spreading through the room like wildfire. Hiddleston's hands clenched slightly on the arms of his chair, the only outward sign of the storm brewing beneath his carefully maintained exterior. "I'm not sure what you're trying to accomplish here, Jimmy, but I think we should perhaps move on to discussing my upcoming projects." "Your upcoming projects?" Kimmel's laugh was sharp and cruel, cutting through the tension like a blade. "You mean the ones where you'll inevitably play the sympathetic villain again? The sad, misunderstood character that audiences are supposed to feel sorry for? It's like you've typecast yourself as the entertainment industry's perpetual underdog." The breaking point was approaching rapidly. Hiddleston's publicist, seated in the front row, looked mortified and was frantically gesturing to the show's producers off-camera. But Kimmel seemed oblivious to the growing crisis unfolding before millions of viewers, or perhaps he simply didn't care. "Let me ask you something else, Tom," Kimmel continued, his voice taking on an even more sinister edge. "Do you ever wonder if Marvel keeps you around just because you're cheap? I mean, compared to the real stars like Robert Downey Jr. or Chris Evans, you're probably working for peanuts, right? The bargain basement Avenger." That was the moment everything changed. Hiddleston's mask of professionalism finally began to slip completely, revealing something raw and dangerous underneath. His voice, when he spoke, carried a deadly quiet that made everyone in the studio lean forward. "I think," Hiddleston said, each word carefully measured and dripping with barely contained fury, "that you've crossed a line that no professional broadcaster should ever cross. You're not just attacking my work. You're attacking my character, my integrity, and my worth as a human being." The audience fell completely silent, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Kimmel, however, seemed to interpret this as encouragement rather than the warning it clearly was. He leaned forward with a predatory smile that would haunt viewers for weeks to come. "Oh, did I hit a nerve, Tommy? Maybe the truth hurts a little bit?" The nickname Tommy, delivered with such condescending venom, was the final straw. Something fundamental shifted in Tom Hiddleston's demeanor, a transformation so complete and terrifying that even the cameramen stopped what they were doing to stare. The gentle, scholarly actor who had charmed audiences worldwide was gone, replaced by something far more primal and dangerous. "Don't," Hiddleston said, his voice now carrying the full weight of classical training and barely restrained fury, "we ever call me that again." The words were delivered with such intensity that several audience members actually flinched. This wasn't the Tom Hiddleston they knew from red carpets and press junkets. This was someone who had been pushed beyond his limits by a host who seemed determined to destroy him on live television. Kimmel, however, appeared to be feeding off the chaos he had created. His eyes gleamed with malicious satisfaction as he pressed forward with his assault. "What are you going to do about it, Tommy? Storm off the set like some kind of diva? Prove to everyone watching that you really are just another overprivileged actor who can't handle a little honest criticism?" the studio audience began to turn. What had started as uncomfortable murmuring evolved into audible disapproval directed squarely at Kimmel. Several people in the front rows were shaking their heads in disgust, while others pulled out their phones to document what was clearly becoming a career-ending moment for someone, though it remained unclear who would ultimately pay the price. Hiddleston stood up slowly, his full height imposing in a way that reminded everyone why he had been cast as a god in the first place. When he spoke, his voice carried the commanding presence of someone who had conquered stages from the West End to Broadway. "Jimmy," he said, his British accent now sharp as a blade, "I came here tonight to promote my work and engage in professional discourse. Instead, you've chosen to humiliate me, demean my career, and insult my character for what I can only assume is your own twisted entertainment." "Oh, here we go," Kimmel interrupted with a dismissive wave, but for the first time there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. The audience's mood had shifted dramatically, and even he couldn't ignore the hostile energy now directed toward him. "The British Sophistication Act. Very impressive, Tommy." That was the moment Tom Hiddleston truly snapped. The transformation was so complete and shocking that it would be replayed millions of times across social media platforms within hours. His voice, when he responded, carried the full force of Shakespearean training combined with genuine rage. "You want to know what's truly pathetic, Jimmy?" Hiddleston's words cut through the studio like a sword. "It's a grown man who makes his living by tearing down people who are more talented, more successful, and more respected than he could ever dream of being. You're not a comedian. You're a bully with a television show." The audience erupted, not in laughter or applause, but in shocked gasps and murmurs of approval for Hiddleston's devastating counterattack. Kimmel's face flushed red, his carefully constructed television persona crumbling in real time as he realized he had pushed too far. "How dare you?" Kimmel sputtered, his voice rising to a pitch that betrayed his growing panic. "This is my show. I've been doing this for years, and I don't need some second-rate villain actor telling me how to do my job." The words hung in the air like a death sentence for Kimmel's reputation. Hiddleston smiled, but it was a cold, dangerous expression that sent chills through everyone present. "Second-rate?" Hiddleston repeated quietly, his voice now deadly calm. "Let me tell you something about second-rate, Jimmy." The entire studio held its breath as Hiddleston stepped closer to Kimmel's desk, his presence suddenly commanding the room in a way that reminded everyone why he had been chosen to portray gods and kings on screen. The transformation was complete. The polite gentleman was gone, replaced by someone wielding words like weapons with surgical precision. Second-rate is a talk show host who peaked decades ago and now survives by destroying other people's reputations because he has nothing left of his own to offer, Hiddleston continued, his voice carrying across the silent studio with devastating clarity. Second-rate is someone who confuses cruelty with comedy and mistakes bullying for entertainment. Kimmel's face had gone from red to pale, his hands visibly shaking as he gripped his desk. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and everyone in the studio could feel it. The host who had seemed so confident moments earlier was now visibly rattled, his carefully constructed persona crumbling under Hiddleston's withering assault. "You don't know what you're talking about," Kimmel stammered, but his voice lacked any conviction. "I've been nominated for Emmys. I've hosted award shows." "And what have you done lately?" Hiddleston interrupted, his British accent cutting through Kimmel's protests like a blade. "Besides sitting behind this desk night after night, desperately, trying to remain relevant by attacking people who are actually creating something meaningful with their lives?" The audience was completely silent now, mesmerized by the spectacular destruction of a television host's career playing out in real time. Several people in the front rows were recording on their phones, capturing every devastating word for posterity. Kimmel tried to recover, his voice rising desperately. "This is ridiculous. Security! Get this maniac off my stage!" But Hiddleston wasn't finished. He turned to face the audience directly, his voice carrying the full power of his theatrical training as he delivered what would become one of the most quoted speeches in late-night television history. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice ringing with authority, "you've just witnessed something that happens far too often in this industry. A person in power using that power to humiliate and degrade others for their own twisted satisfaction. This man invited me here tonight under the pretense of promoting my work, then proceeded to systematically attack my character, my career, and my worth as a human being." The audience began to applaud, slowly at first, then building to a thunderous ovation that lasted nearly a minute. Kimmel sat frozen behind his desk, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly as he realized the crowd had turned completely against him. "You want to know what's truly pathetic?" Hiddleston continued when the applause died down. "It's watching a grown man try to build himself up by tearing others down. It's witnessing someone who once had talent and promise reduced to this desperate attempt to stay relevant through manufactured controversy." Kimmel finally found his voice, though it cracked with emotion and barely contained rage. "Get out! Get out of my studio right now! You're banned from this show forever!" Hiddleston smiled that same cold, dangerous smile that had terrified audiences worldwide when he portrayed Loki's darker moments. "Jimmy," he said quietly, "I wouldn't come back to this pathetic excuse for a television show if you paid me. And after tonight, I don't think you'll have a show much longer anyway." The prediction hung in the air like a prophecy, and everyone present seemed to understand they had just witnessed something that would change everything. The studio erupted in chaos as producers rushed onto the set, audience members began shouting their support for Hiddleston, and Kimmel sat motionless, behind his desk, his career seemingly ending before their eyes. Security guards appeared from the wings, but they stopped in confusion when they realized the audience was cheering for the supposed problem guest while glaring with undisguised disgust at their own host. The pandemonium reached a fever pitch as people began chanting Hiddleston's name, their voices echoing through the studio in a thunderous display of support that would be remembered for years to come. Hiddleston raised his hand, and remarkably, the crowd fell silent. The power he commanded in that moment was absolute, a complete reversal of the traditional late-night dynamic where the host controlled the room. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of righteousness, and the satisfaction of justice finally served. "I want everyone here to remember this moment," he declared, his gaze sweeping across the audience before settling on the cameras that were still rolling, broadcasting. His words to millions of viewers: "Remember what happens when someone mistakes kindness for weakness, when they confuse professionalism with vulnerability. This man thought he could destroy me on national television for his own amusement." Kimmel finally managed to speak, his voice barely above a whisper but audible in the deadly quiet studio. "Tom, please. I was just trying to be entertaining. It's comedy. It's what we do here." "No," Hiddleston cut him off with devastating finality. "What you did here tonight wasn't comedy. It was cruelty disguised as entertainment, and the entire world just watched you reveal your true character. Comedy should bring joy, not inflict pain. Entertainment should elevate people, not destroy them." The audience erupted again, this time in sustained applause that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Several people in the front rows were openly crying, moved by the raw emotion and dignity Hiddleston had displayed under such vicious attack. As the applause continued, Hiddleston straightened his jacket with deliberate care, every movement calculated to project the dignity and class that Kimmel had tried to strip away. He looked directly into the main camera, speaking to the millions watching at home. "To everyone watching tonight, I want you to remember that respect and professionalism aren't old-fashioned concepts. They're the foundation of any civilized society. When those in positions of power abuse that privilege to hurt others, it's up to all of us to stand up and say, 'Enough.'" With that, he turned his back on Kimmel completely, walking toward the exit with the measured pace of someone who had just won the most important battle of his career. The audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation that lasted several minutes, their cheers following him as he disappeared behind the curtain. Kimmel remained frozen at his desk, staring at the spot where Hiddleston had stood, the weight of his actions finally settling on his shoulders. The show's producers frantically signaled to cut to commercial, but the damage was already done. Within hours, clips of the confrontation would be trending worldwide, with overwhelming support for Hiddleston and devastating criticism of Kimmel's conduct. The incident became a watershed moment in entertainment history, sparking conversations about the responsibility that comes with platform and power. Kimmel's ratings plummeted in the following weeks as advertisers distanced themselves from the controversy, while Hiddleston's reputation soared to new heights. The confrontation that was meant to humiliate him instead revealed the strength of his character and the hollow nature of those who mistake cruelty for comedy. In the end, Tom Hiddleston's dramatic exit from Jimmy Kimmel Live became more than just a moment of television history. It became a masterclass in dignity under fire, and a reminder that sometimes the most powerful response to a bully is simply refusing to be broken.